Our next speaker is the Secretary of the Jefferson Area Libertarians. He's a engineering professor at the University of Virginia and also previously served as the national chairman of the Libertarian Party. Please welcome Dr. James Lark.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize for the unseasonably warm temperatures today. I hope that I'm very appreciative that you would come out. I suspect that the weather will cool off a little bit later on. I'd like to thank my distinguished colleague John Munchmeyer and my Jefferson Area Libertarian teammates for organizing this event. As Mr. Munchmeyer pointed out, I believe this is the 19th time we've done this. We started in 1999. We're here to celebrate the ratification of a truly remarkable document. The Bill of Rights, ratified on December 15, 1791, emphasized particular aspects of some truly important concepts. First of all, that governments are instituted among people to secure our rights. Our rights exist prior to the formation or establishment of government. That powers of government are to be few and enumerated, and that the powers of government should be devolved to the lowest possible levels. Unfortunately, from the time of the ratification of the Bill of Rights, we've seen it under attack. And I'd like to take a few moments to talk about a particular amendment that I think is under attack. I've done this on a few occasions. Unfortunately, it seems that the different amendments keep changing. Today, I'd like to mention the attacks that are taking place on the First Amendment. We read the First Amendment. I'll do it again. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Unfortunately, we see this amendment and the rights that are reflected in the amendment under severe assault. And it comes from both the left and the right, to the extent that those terms still make sense. It comes from both the left and the right. Here in the Charlottesville area, of course, we've seen what happens when people assemble to offer their opinions about certain things. Opinions with which, by the way, I don't particularly agree, or at least not necessarily agree, but we've seen efforts to try to squelch the efforts to assemble and to offer their opinions. On college campuses, fortunately, not so much the University of Virginia, at least not yet, but in other institutions, such as the University of California at Berkeley, and other institutions of high repute, we've seen efforts by students basically to say that others cannot speak. That we've seen, in some cases, forcible interference with the right of people to offer their opinions. We see on the right, we see efforts by President Trump, or at least not so much efforts, but at least indications that there may be an attempt to restrict our rights. President Trump, for example, suggested, and I quote, "Nobody should be allowed to burn the American flag. If they do, there must be consequences, perhaps loss of citizenship or a year in jail." Mr. Trump also said, "We should open up our libel laws so that when they," referring to the media, "write purposefully negative and horrible and false articles, we can sue them and win lots of money. The failing New York Times has disgraced the media world, gotten me wrong for 2 solid years, changed libel laws. It's frankly disgusting the way the press is able to write whatever they want to write, and people should look into it." We have a situation where at William & Mary this year, Claire Gastineaga of the ACLU was shouted down by a group of students who simply did not want to hear what she had to say. Now, the ACLU typically, when they see something like this, would actually be very good about coming forward and saying, "Wait a minute, what you're trying to do in this particular case is at best very bad. It may actually be a violation of the Constitution." Unfortunately, we see the ACLU, which has a noble tradition of standing up for the liberties that we enjoy, at least with respect to the First Amendment, they're now starting to back off. We saw a situation, for example, where in October, about 200 ACLU staffers, and this was out of roughly 1,300, signed an open letter arguing in favor of restrictions on what they refer to as hate speech which unfortunately, again, this represents a tremendous departure from their noble tradition. Some of these people, in arguing for the ACLU to back away from protecting people's right to speak, they said, quote, "Our broader mission, which includes advancing the racial justice guarantees in the Constitution and elsewhere, not just the First Amendment, continues to be undermined by our rigid stance in favor of the First Amendment." The Brookings Institution put forward a study where they reported that something like 19% of undergraduate respondents agreed it was acceptable for a student group to use violence to prevent, quote, "a controversial campus speaker from making, quote, offensive and hurtful statements." The Annenberg Public Policy Survey that recently came out pointed out when people were asked what rights does the First Amendment guarantee, fewer than half of American adults were able to dig up freedom of speech, and only 14% managed to mention freedom of the press. A full 37% couldn't name any First Amendment rights at all. This is truly frightening, ladies and gentlemen. I would hope that we who believe in individual liberty and personal responsibility will redouble our efforts to try to make sure that all of the rights that are recognized in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are protected. And I think that we need to make special effort to work on the rights that are referred to in the First Amendment. And I fear that we're seeing those rights erode at a very brisk pace. So let us redouble our efforts. Let us rededicate ourselves to the effort to protect our liberties. Thank you very much for being here, ladies and gentlemen. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.